We're continuing in our Stories of Grace series, highlighting God's faithfulness and loving kindness in the lives of Bethel University faculty and staff. This morning, we're blessed to hear from Dr. Kent Eby. Kent has taught missions and intercultural studies at Bethel for nearly 2 decades and currently serves as director of the Intercultural Studies program and the Missionary Church Endowed Professor of Biblical Theology. Before coming to Bethel, Kent and his wife Linda served as World Partners missionaries at St. Petersburg Christian University in St. Petersburg, Russia. Kent has an intense passion for scripture and missions and loves teaching and interacting with students and colleagues inside and outside the classroom. He and Linda have been married for over 33 years, and they have one son who is a Bethel alum. Kent is an ordained pastor in the missionary church, and he and Linda enjoy serving at Brenneman Memorial Church in a variety of capacities. In his free time, Kent enjoys spending quality time with family and friends, traveling and teaching internationally. Would you please welcome to the Bethel stage, Dr. Kent Eby.
Well, good morning, Bethel. So that picture of me squatting and drinking, that's camel's milk. If you ever get a chance, that's the best milk you'll ever drink. Well, it's an honor and also very humbling to have this opportunity to share a little bit of my testimony with you this morning. A personal testimony usually takes one of two directions. It either focuses on the person giving it, or it focuses on the one or ones most influential in it. This morning, I'll share various events from my Jesus journey. Is it up there? There we go. But my prayer is this, you all. My prayer is that we, all of us here this morning, will focus not on me, not on Kent, but on God, who is and always will be the one, the most important person in this journey. Since becoming a follower of Jesus, Psalm 139 has been a very impactful passage for me. The life of David and this psalm have helped me process and understand significant times in my own life. And this morning, I'll be using truths found in Psalm 139 to reflect on who God has become in my life. So if you were in chapel on Monday, as Dr. Fish was sharing in chapel, she used Psalm 139 as a passage that framed her testimony. I was sitting here in chapel and I was praying and I was praising God for his hand in directing both of us to select the same passage. You all, we didn't talk about this. This was all God. And so I believe God has a message for us this week. There's some reason he directed both of us to Psalm 139. All my life, I'm just going to be really transparent with you all this morning. All my life, I've struggled with self-identity. I've always felt less than and have perceived others to be better than me. You see, when we compare ourselves to others, we can always find people who are better than us or people who are worse than us. Go ahead if you would put up Psalm 139. I want to read to you Psalm 139, verses 13 through 16, because these verses have helped me to see that comparison is so wrong, you all. My value and identity do not come from how I compare with others, but rather from the one who created me. Psalm 139, 13 through 16 says, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." I deeply appreciated the way Dr. Fish summarized this passage on Monday. And if you don't mind, Dr. Fish, I'm gonna plagiarize your words, because I think it's so well put together. She summarized this passage this way. She said, Psalm 139, verses 13 through 16, God's telling us that we're fully known and we're fully loved. we're fully known, and we're fully loved. I'll begin my journey when I was in middle school. I attended a Christian school that went from grades 8 to 12. In 8th grade, I was 6 feet tall, and I weighed soaking wet 95 pounds. I was as skinny as a rail, and I was all arms and all legs. I'd always hung out with the kids that were athletes because I desperately wanted to be an athlete myself. I have an older brother who's a phenomenal athlete. I wanted to be like my older brother. And that's who I compared myself to, were these kids who were athletes. The school I attended was associated with a local Christian college, and we shared a cafeteria with the college, so we had to walk from our school to the college cafeteria, and it was about a quarter of a mile walk. And my friends thought it was really fun to walk behind me, and as I would walk, have you ever walked and somebody's clicked your foot and your heel, your foot locks? They would click my heel and see how many times they could get me to fall on the way to lunch. They thought it was hilarious. I laughed with them as well because I didn't want them to know how devastated I was on the inside. Go ahead and give us the next slide if you could. I worked so hard the next 4 years, you all, to prove that I was good enough. Although I remained skinny, my coordination eventually came. In my final year of high school, I was a 2-year starter on our soccer team, and I was first team all-conference in basketball. On the outside, it looked like I had arrived. But on the inside, I was still struggling with this low self-image. I still saw myself as inferior. Sorry, I wasn't going to do this, but just in case I brought these. Some of this stuff, you all, even 40, 50 years later, are still so raw. Spiritually, I've grown up, having grown up in a Christian family and attended a Christian high school, I did everything I knew to do as a good Christian to be a Christian. The problem was I focused on doing the right things, but I really had very little knowledge about a relationship with Jesus. I knew all about Jesus. We went to church every time the doors were open. I could tell you everything that you wanted to know about Jesus, but I didn't know him intimately. I didn't have that relationship with him. My senior year of high school, my world began to fall apart. My parents' business was failing, their marriage was strained. I graduated high school, and soon after, we moved to Indiana so that my father could partner with his brother on the family dairy farm. My older brother was off at college. My 2 younger siblings were in school. I, on the other hand, had no plans for college, so by default, I worked on the farm. I really did enjoy the dairy farm. In fact, I thought I would be a dairy farmer my whole life because I really like cows. But as an 18-year-old, the schedule of milking on a dairy farm at 4 in the morning and then at 5 at night until 7:30, 8 o'clock at night isn't conducive for making friends. And that year and a half that I worked on the dairy farm, you all, were the loneliest years of my life. And in that loneliness, because my parents were struggling, my relationship with my mom and dad was becoming more and more broken. God, what are you doing? Why is my life so lonely and miserable? Why are so many people who call themselves Christians mean and judgmental? I felt I had nowhere to turn. So when my high school soccer coach sent me a letter that he had taken a coaching position at a junior college in Kansas, and he wanted me to come out and join the team, I couldn't pack fast enough, you all. I quickly ran away from my family, and I also believed I had run away from God. Go ahead, there it is. That was my smile. That was my smile, you all. I had no joy in my heart. I had no joy in my heart. I was still struggling with identity, but now my solution was run away. Surely if I can get away from these places and people that have let me down, I can find a better place on my own. But can we really run away from God? Next slide. Psalm 139, verses 1 through 12 says this, "O Lord, you have searched me and you know me. You know when I sit, you know when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all of my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely, O Lord. You hem me in behind and before. You've laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you're there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me and the light become a night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you." Here David realizes that no matter where he runs, God is there. God's love is so deep and so wide that when we believe we're running away from God, we're actually running to him. The first year of college academically was great, but socially a disaster. So I didn't return for my sophomore year. And my world continued spinning out of control, and I kept on running. 3 years later, I found myself back in Virginia, where I'd grown up, working in sales for a company and still running from my family and still running from God. Unbeknownst to me at that time, nothing surprises God, and he had me right where he wanted me. On weekends and evenings, I worked for a couple who were like my adoptive grandparents. You see, growing up in Virginia, I didn't have any family there. My grandparents were all here in Indiana. So there was an elderly couple that were our next-door neighbors, and they adopted our family into theirs, so many holidays we spent with them. And they were affectionately known as Papa Joe and Babshi. When I returned to Virginia, I reconnected with them, and by this time, Papa Joe and Babshi were retired and in declining health physically. So I spent lots of time with them, doing odd jobs around their house, keeping their yard in good shape. Papa Joe was all about education. He always talked to us about education. So he kept pushing me and pushing me and pushing me to go back to college. I resisted. After all, education was not for me. I finally gave in and enrolled at James Madison University. Upon graduating with a degree in accounting and economics, my life goal changed. My life goal now was to make $1 million. Maybe that would stop my world from spinning out of control. Maybe that would bring some joy into my life. Maybe that would help me to see myself differently so I could stop running. I accepted a commission with the U.S. government serving in Washington, D.C., with what at that time was called the United States General Accounting Office. You can go to the next slide, thanks. Relevant side note. Every Sunday afternoon, my parents would call me, and they would ask me if I went to church that day. And every Sunday, I gave them the same response. No! I want nothing to do with God. Things were finally starting to look up. After only a year with the GAO, I was placed on a special assignment with Congress, specifically working as an investigative accountant with the House Energy and Commerce Committee, Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigation. I was a junior member on a team that was investigating an insurance fraud case, which had taken down 2 large reinsurance companies. Wow, I had arrived, or so I thought. I worked 70 to 80 hours a week, partially because I enjoyed my work. It was interesting and it was fun, but mostly because I didn't like being at home. When I was at home in my apartment, I had too much time to think and too much time to remember how miserable I am. Late that summer, my parents came to Washington, D.C. to visit. I took them all around Capitol Hill. I had a congressional ID. I could get in anywhere that congressional staff or Congress could get into. And I don't know if you know it or not, but there are tunnels all over Capitol Hill. You can go. There's a special subway for senators. There's shops, so many things underground. So I took my mom and dad in there. The icing on the cake was I was able to arrange a meeting with the Comptroller General of the United States, the boss of my agency. And my parents spent 10, 15 minutes with him. I'll never forget walking out of his office. And my dad looked at me. My father, with whom my relationship was very tenuous at that point, my father looked at me and he said, "Son, I'm proud of you. You've arrived." Maybe life was getting better, but inside I was still miserable. A month later, a congressional staffer and I were working late to assemble materials from our investigation for an interview between the general counsel of the subcommittee and Business Week magazine. We left the office around 8:30 that evening, and we were walking to our cars, 6-lane road. We were walking on the sidewalk, and 9 men crossed 6 lanes of traffic and surrounded us and began to beat the living daylights out of us. Before I could even react, 2 of them punched me in the face, and I found myself on the ground. They were kicking me in the head, and they were kicking me in the sides. They were ripping my pockets, trying to get my money. The rest is pretty much a blur. I don't remember if I was conscious or unconscious, but I do remember wondering when the knife would go in or the shot would go off, because I thought I was going to die. And I knew in the depth of my soul that if I died at that moment, I had rejected Jesus. The fear that went through me was palpable, and I felt and saw darkness. I don't know if you've ever experienced feeling darkness, but I felt darkness, and I can't put it into words. All I remember is crying out in my soul, "Jesus, save my soul. I do believe in you." The next thing I remember, there were police cars everywhere. The ambulance were there. People were surrounding both of us. I was later released that evening to go home about 3:30 in the morning. And I was very fortunate. All I had was a concussion, a dislocated jaw, and broken ribs. Go ahead and put the next slide up there. There's an article that talked about that experience. After my roommates had gone to work the next morning, I was in my room and I was so upset with God, you all, because I had asked him to save my soul, which he did. I was very grateful for that. But I didn't ask him to save my life, but he did that as well. Now what? Sitting alone in my apartment, the place that up to that time I had avoided whenever possible, I cried out to God and I asked him to take the lead. I had no idea what to do. I had no idea where to go. I had no idea to whom I should turn. So I surrendered everything. And I promised him that day that if he would lead, I would follow. He quickly directed me to a church. There's so many stories I could tell, but I'm going to just give you the highlights. He quickly directed me to a church where a pastor began to disciple and mentor me. I was growing in my faith, and as I learned more and more, not just about Jesus, but truly and deeply who Jesus is, it was amazing. I still love my job. I still work crazy hours, but I no longer dreaded going home to my apartment. I finally stopped running away, and I ran straight into the arms of Jesus. My parents would call me every Sunday afternoon. They stopped asking me if I went to church, and they started asking me what I was learning from church. Go ahead and go to the next slide if you would. My life verses became Psalm 139, verses 23 and 24. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there's any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. After all that had happened, I realized that my life was truly in God's hands. And I believed in these verses. David also realized, I think, in these verses, this truth, that our lives are in God's hands. I never want to walk without God by my side, ever. And I never want a day to go by where I have failed to follow Jesus' lead. 8 months later, while home for Easter, I was introduced to an amazing and gorgeous lady. She's sitting right over there. And just over 2 years later, we were married. She's the love of my life, my best friend, and my wonderful wife. During our engagement, I had taken a mission trip to Romania, and God broke my heart for missions. So after Linda and I got married, we talked to one another, we prayed about it, and we, 2 years later, packed up and moved to Russia as missionaries with World Partners. You can go ahead, there you go. That's a young me. Isn't she beautiful? She's even more pretty now. The really beautiful thing, you all, in this is this time going to Russia, I wasn't running from God, but I was running with God. God is so faithful to his word. He continually allows us to be tested. He wants us to be strong. So even after we become followers of Jesus, it doesn't mean that life goes exactly the way we want it to go. Our second year in Russia, after language study, our team, there were 4 of us, 2 couples, met with the leadership of the fledgling university where we were working and our mission supervisor. Long story short, they went around the room and they looked at my wife. She's an English teacher, and they said, "We absolutely want you." They looked at the other couple and they said, "We want you for this, you for that." They looked at me and they said, "We don't need you. You're unqualified." Okay, God, now what? So for nearly 2 years, my wife served full-time at the university, and I took care of things at home. I cleaned, I did laundry, I bought groceries, but I didn't cook because she's a much better cook than I am. You can see that right here. I studied scripture. I prepared a class on servant leadership just in case I might have the opportunity to teach. I also contacted the administrative vice president of the university where my wife was teaching, and I asked if I could serve in some way. Anyway, I can't sit still. Living on a farm, I'd learned to work with my hands, and I said I would do anything they wanted me to do. The university had just received a shipping container of donated furniture from Germany to fill our dormitory for our students. But every piece of furniture was broken. So they gave me a space in the basement of the building, a room about 20 foot long, 12 foot wide, filled 4 foot high with broken lumber and broken cinder blocks, and I had a space 10 by 10 that was cleaned out for me to work. I had a table saw, a hammer, a pair of pliers, a regular screwdriver, and a Phillips head screwdriver. Oh, and my roommates in that room were rats about that long. For a year and a half, I repaired furniture, built tabletop podiums for the classrooms, constructed a mailbox system for our students, and anything else they asked me to do. During this time, I developed a really strong friendship with the administrative vice president. He was a Russian man, and for him, it was unusual for an American to be willing to work in the basement unseen by most and working among rats. I was still questioning God about what he was doing in this situation. After all, I didn't quit my commission with the federal government to go to Russia and work in basements. But this time was different than the past. This time I was trusting God. The next spring, 1996, we lost our first child. Linda was entering the second trimester of her pregnancy, and the baby died. But God stepped in, you all, in such an amazing way to care for us. He had our backs. In May of that same year, I met a graduate of the university who had started a Christian college in Chisinau, Moldova, and he asked me to come teach in his college in November of 1996. So in November, I flew to Moldova. I taught at the Christian college and in local churches for a month. Evidently, things went fairly well, because when I came back to St. Petersburg to the Christian University in St. Petersburg, they asked if I would teach the class the upcoming spring semester. So in spring 1997, I taught my first class at university level. And I, after class, would go to the basement and continue my work down there with my friends, the rats. During spring 1997, the university announced that it had hired its first Russian president. And somehow, to this day, I still don't know how, he found out that my background was in accounting and banking. So he called me to his office, and he asked if I would become his personal assistant. He would make me a vice president in the university. Long story short, you all, I moved from rats for roommates to working in an office suite right next to the president of the university. And the vice president of administration was no longer my boss, but my colleague, and sometimes answerable to me. So what was God doing? You all, I couldn't have planned this any way better than he did. The rapport that I was able to develop in those 2 years working in that basement prepared the way for me to come into that team of Russian leaders, not as an outsider, but as one of them, because I was willing to serve under them, and now serve with them. Running with God is not always easy, but it is always amazing. That's the university in St. Petersburg. Over the next 10 years, God used this leadership team to get accreditation for the university, to purchase and renovate those 2 buildings on about a 3-acre plot of land near the center of St. Petersburg. That property, when we finished renovating it, was appraised at $13.5 million. And God gave it to us debt-free. In 2007, it was clear that our work at the university was completed. Our goal was to work ourselves out of a job. Knowing that Russia would probably close one day, we wanted the university to be Russian-led, Russian-staffed, and Russian-funded. And that was happening. So in 2007, we moved back to the United States to serve our families. Our parents were going through health issues, to serve our families, and to teach in the U.S. We felt our ministry now was in the U.S. Bethel was gracious enough to hire me, and Linda is working in public school as an E&L teacher, currently at Goshen Junior High. There's so many stories I could tell you concerning the amazingness of God, you all, and how he stretched us and grew us, how he watched over us and protected us, how he blessed us and provided for us, and he poured himself into us. Go ahead and change the slide if you would. And now, I stand before all of you and proclaim with deep humility and great faith in my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ that I no longer feel inferior. I no longer compare myself to others. I have a new identity. I have deep purpose and meaning in my life. And my hope comes from not what I do, but whom I love. The one who stepped in on that sidewalk in Washington, D.C. on August 16th, 1989. Stop it, Kent. And he heard the cry of my soul for salvation. And he did more than I asked for. He not only saved my soul, you all, he saved my life. We serve an amazing and awesome God, you all. And I love this community. I love the Bethel community. All of you, my colleagues, my students, also affectionately known as my kids. And more than anything, my heart cries out today to God that every day you would know him more deeply. Not know about him, but truly know him. So I've asked the chapel band to lead us in a song. It's one of my favorite songs. It is Well With My Soul. And so what I want to ask of you as we move to the closing of chapel today, and don't leave because we'll close after the song. But as we go into the song, I want to ask you to do this. If you're struggling and you just need to get things right with God, I ask you to come forward and just give it to Jesus until you can sing with us, "It is well with my soul." If your soul's in a good place and you and Jesus are on the right spot, I invite you to stand and sing with us, "It is well with my soul." And when we're done with the song, we'll come up and close.